Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. Today, we continue our deep exploration of the spiritual path of initiation, and we're going to delve into the profound mysteries of the third and fourth initiations, which are known as Transfiguration and Crucifixion. From the building of the light body to the ultimate act of renunciation, this conversation reveals how these advanced stages of spiritual development mark our journey from the personal to the universal. So join us as we explore what it means to truly build the bridge between heaven and earth, and discover why these critical thresholds must be crossed while we're still in the physical form. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Now come with us for the third and fourth initiation. As we've been moving steadily through our initiations, we arrive at a sort of an inflection point. So the third and fourth initiations, we're moving steadily from the lower to the upper. And there's a lot of ways to think about that. And I think one of the things I like to try to do is try to make this land for people in both the visual kind of way and both a way that they can relate to. So, when we're talking about the higher mind and intuition and the mental plane, maybe we can take a moment to sort of expand on that and what that means. Because you've mentioned before, it's not better or worse. That's not the kind of comparison. But I like to think about it sometimes in musical terms of the bass. An upright bass, if you're in an orchestra, or a bass guitar is playing the rhythm that you follow to, and then you have the melodies in the higher registers. But those are frequencies, and those are also we can talk about how you march to a certain drummer, but then your mind also has room to be expanded and follow all these different ideas. So maybe as we move into this, we can kind of look into that. And what's the relationship between the soul, the higher self, and how that relates, and then recap this whole thing for people.
Wow.
So, and it's a big
ask,
because we started as a ponder on this, which is actually kind of smaller snippets, and it actually turned into like a 3-part series on initiation, which
is now a 4-part.
But we feel that it's important because it turns out that this is what we're all going through right now, whether we realize it or not.
Well, this is the journey, and you can have a map and look at the map, and you can read the landscape you're going through. The Ageless Wisdom teaching talks about the inner landscape that you go through, and that's what we've looked at: the astral plane, now the mental plane, moving on to functioning from a focus point on the intuitive level, the Buddhic plane. But before we dive into today's exploration, which is looking at the third and the fourth initiation, and we're not going to go beyond that, because then you've got like the ascended masters, you've got the enlightened beings. It's beyond our understanding. It'll just be merely speculation, and we couldn't apply any of this. So the third and the fourth are useful because they tell you what lies ahead. And in order to move through the tests of now, it's always useful to look at what are the qualities that need to be cultivated for the next initiation, for the next level or 2 levels, because it will give you a sense of what to aspire to and how to build. But to go back to your question, if you look at the physical plane, the emotional plane, and the mental plane, they are subdivided into 7. If you look at the Ageless Wisdom teachings, it will give you a schema, it will give you a table, and it will say the 7. And they talk about the lower 7, or lower 4, and the upper 3,
right?
Which simply means, for instance, the physical plane is divided into 7 subplanes. We are living on the 4th subplane, which is the dense physical, but it's not the most dense. Because right next door to us, where we are sort of moving into, is the 3rd subplane, which is the etheric. So when people talk about etheric, it's still part of the physical. It's the physical etheric. And where we live is the dense physical. It's the lower four. By lower, that's not, once again, a judgment. It means lower in frequency. And therefore, the upper three are the more refined levels. So instead of having a dense physical body, we'll have a more refined, subtle body, a body of light. And you know, with some of the wise beings, that even when they're incarnated on Earth, their body was so radiant that it was translucent, transparent, or they could walk through walls. You read Paramahansa Yogananda's story of his master who was put in prison, and he would just walk through the wall and escape and then sit on the roof and meditate, and they kept putting him back inside.
Yeah.
So you're not constrained by the density of things. And same with the emotional plane. There are 7 subplanes to that. And where we get stuck and waterlogged and submerged is in the lower 4. And the upper 3 are more refined. They're of great sensitivity. Whereas you and I know from experience that the lower 4 is where you get gripped by the gravitational pull of desires, ambitions, and
that's certainly right.
Addictions.
Yeah.
And then with the lower mental, the lower 4, that's where it gets into fixed beliefs. Whereas the higher mind is more fluid because it's in touch with the intuitive, the Buddhic plane, the next one up.
Right.
And therefore, it's a translator. Imagination is that aspect of our being which connects, if you like, our rational mind with our intuitive aspect. So all of these are connections. It's like a continuum. There's no good or bad. It just means we're currently operating, for the most part, in the lower 4 subplanes of the physical, the emotional, and the mental. And the whole thing of initiation is to have us operate from the upper 3. And then the lower 4, we've transcended them. We say escape from them, but how do you escape from the prison? Well, you dissolve the prison. It can no longer imprison you. You've released the light in matter, therefore you're not imprisoned in darkness. So then it isn't you busted out of jail and left the dark behind. Part of why we're here is to help release the light in matter. So,
whenever I hear that, I always think about how a jazz musician must feel about being trapped in 4/4 time.
Exactly. Well, guess what? 4/4 is the planet Earth. We're in 4. We're the 4th planet from the sun. It's a 4th ray planet, harmony through conflict.
Right.
So number 4 is really akin to the Earth. As we said before, a cross and a circle is the astrological and astronomical symbol of the Earth. So 4/4 time is significant.
It is significant. Yeah, it's the rhythm of this plane.
It is. So that's giving some form of explanation of what this is about when we talk about the upper and the lower. It means the dense and the more refined. So the difference between my analytical and my rational mind is that it can crunch numbers, it can deduce based on certain algorithms, but it doesn't have the imaginative, free, spontaneous, creative juice to take spiritual impulses and capture them in a new form. The mind, the lower mind for me, deals with what already is. The higher mind is part of the bridge to the future.
Right.
And then we'll touch on this as we go through these initiations. It goes back to a podcast that we did recently on building the Antakarana.
Yeah.
We walk a path from here to there. And the corresponding path is walking across the bridge. First of all, you've got to build the bridge. And you build it as you walk on it. You walk on it as you build it.
Yeah, like each step is like a leap of faith a little bit,
It is.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
That helps incredibly. I just wanted to maybe try to land it a little bit so people can have some kind of relationship to it. So it's not just words.
I appreciate that, Joey, because we're dealing with the ageless wisdom teaching, and normally somebody would enter this because they've been led into this. But now, because information is so prevalent, it's readily accessible, people stumble across these mysterious things, what that before were hidden
Mm-hmm.
unless you were part of an order.
Right.
And now you can go look up all this stuff up on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have the context. You weren't introduced to it by your own soul, um, being part of a teachers group.
Yeah. It's also kind of like in Judaism, there's the written Torah, but then there's also the oral Torah,
Yes.
and you don't realize that they go together. You can't, if you just take the text, you're missing half the story. So, I realize that goes along with, you can apply that to anything. You can, just think about your friend group and the way you talk about people. If you don't, there's the written story, and then you also know the oral story of how you came together. And so there's two components to this, and
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that the text is the best description, like a map. Is not always a territory.
Exactly. And that's why we'd said initiation is not a written test.
Mhm.
It's an in the flesh test requiring in the flesh responses. And we'll get into this because it explains when we get into the fourth initiation why the first three have to be taken inside an incarnated form.
Mhm. Right.
There's a reason for it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm excited to get to that part.
so the third initiation is what we're going to be focusing on first. We said the first initiation was the birth. That's the awakening of something greater. It's not just about me. It usually is the opening of the mind and the beginning of the opening of the heart. And the second initiation is baptism, where you're baptized in the waters of life and you realize you're here to serve life. It's a huge shift. And the third is called transfiguration, where there is a metamorphosis.
Mm.
There is an actual shift because you are now building a light body and you are overcoming, as we said before, the gravitational pull of the lower frequency band that served you up to now. But now you're building a body that's more refined. And as you move through the different stages of initiation, what happens to your physical or your atomic structure? It becomes more refined. The atoms of your being start to vibrate at a higher frequency until they reach a point at one particular initiation where you radiate light.
Mm.
And this is where you've got the depictions of the gloria or the aura around saints in medieval paintings, or you've got emanations coming from enlightened beings, because you are then causal. You are then a light body that, just like the sun, is able to emit light, not just absorb and reflect it.
Mm.
So we are sons in the making.
All right. Yeah, that's
the whole path of initiation.
Mm. Yeah.
The sons of God, S-U-N-S of God, the sons
Mhm.
of God.
Yeah, that's
And when they said the sons of God, S-O-N-S, in the masculine form, it simply meant the offspring of God.
right.
The mother and the father produce a new light out of their Holy Communion, which is
Yeah.
the new light of day.
It's beautiful to think about that because, they say you're made of stardust. A star is the sun. So it's this continual cycle. We're being reborn and learning and retraining.
So why don't we proceed as we've done with the other three in the
Yeah, let's
series, that
go.
we'll read the text. And if this is your first time sort of tuning into this series of the initiation, we would highly recommend you go back and start with number 1, because it puts it into context. And we're going to do a little bit of recap, but we're not going to give you the sort of the setting in which to place this jewel. So, and once again, the other disclaimer is the language used is written 70, 80 years ago, and it uses the masculine pronoun. And we're going to keep with the original text because it's easier to read that way. But we realize here in 2024, we're holding it differently in our heart and mind. So our process is we read some text, we stop, we reflect, we ponder, and then we reflect, if you like, with some personal anecdotes, if some come to mind, and then we move on, one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So let's begin with the first paragraph. After the second initiation, the teaching shifts up a plane. That's what we're talking about. Initiation is the liberation and the freeing of our consciousness from one plane to the next plane until it's at a plane where it can shine. And that's really what it is. So the third initiation is a shifting to a new plane. The initiate learns to control his mental vehicle. He develops the capacity to manipulate thought matter and learns the laws of creative thought building. Now, this sounds kind of weird. It sounds like an old-fashioned magician.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically learning what it means to be a creator. Here at Meditation Mount, we have creative meditation, which is exactly this, the capacity to manipulate thought matter. Manipulate, not in a bad way, but to actually use the power of thought to shape new visions, new ideas, new magnetic memes, new seed thoughts of a preferred future. And then these are broadcast in the ethers. So the task of imagination and the higher mind is to actually build the architecture, the inner architecture of the world that you want to construct. And the third initiation is where you start to get all your tools together, all your equipment, and the master craftsperson is at one with the tools. He functions freely on the 4 lower subplanes of the mental plane. And before the third initiation, he must, consciously or unconsciously, be complete master of the 4 lower subplanes of the 3 planes of the 3 worlds. Now that ties into what we said in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to make sure you don't drown in the emotional waters. You're at the higher, more refined levels where it's not the water you're drowning.
Right.
And the same, you're in a physical body where you're not incarcerated. You're incarnated, but not incarcerated.
That's a very distinct difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then with the mental plane, the lower 4 is that you would be in the concrete mind, the rational mind, but moving up to the higher 3 allows you now to complete the bridge between heaven and earth, the antakarana, and where inspiration can freely flow from the soul into its appointed agent on earth. The Joeys and the Michaels and the people that are listening, this is what we are. We have to create the connective tissue between heaven and earth, between our soul, our personality. We do that by building the rainbow bridge and by walking the path of initiation. And initiation isn't because we want to get to a place where we are recognized and rewarded. Initiation is the natural expansion of our consciousness as we take the next step. And initiation is simply termed as an increased capacity to carry out the will of life, the purpose of life. So it's not about personal rewards. As we said before, there's no Cooperstown waiting for a Hall of Fame for all the good servers of the world. In fact, it goes the other way. You become anonymous.
Yeah. That's one thing to consider about this journey.
So, at the third initiation, termed sometimes the Transfiguration, the entire personality is flooded with light from above. See, that's what we just said. Now you're able to receive the light from above. Mm-hmm. And this is where the Plato's cave, the roof of the cave now becomes transparent, translucent, and the light comes in from there. So the light floods into the cave and dispels the shadows.
That's right.
It is only after this initiation, the third, that the monad is definitely guiding the ego, pouring his divine life ever more into the prepared and cleansed channel. And we talked before about the monad. It's the highest fire. It's really our essential nature, the monadic fire. And it's such a powerful fire that it couldn't live on earth unless it had an appropriate and suitable fireplace. And the fireplace is the soul-infused personality.
Mm.
The fireplace cannot be the personality by itself. It would burn it up. It would fry it. It would be toast.
Mm.
So you, as we've said several times, if you want to invoke fire, make sure you've got a fireplace to receive it. So what you're doing with initiation is increasing your capacity to work with fire.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, a vision is accorded of what lies ahead. The initiate is in a position at all times to recognize other members of the ashram, all the people who have pledged their lives to live lives of service, lives of the soul. And then it says, the aim of all development is the awakening of the spiritual intuition. When this has been done, when the physical body is pure, the astral stable and steady, and the mental body controlled, then the initiate can safely wield and wisely use the psychic faculties for the helping of humanity. We're only equipped to be of service once we've built this new capacity.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense that you have to build the foundation and pour the concrete, and you have to be able to support this this journey. You have to support this fire. I like the fireplace fire analogy because it's so apt.
Well, yeah, and you can take this into the temple as well, because the temple is built, the temple of self, the outer temple, is built to house the inner fire.
That's right.
The Holy of Holies, the Sancta Sanctorum.
Right.
And we do it on a personal level. People don't realize that our lives are here to build a temple. And people, when they think of temple, they think of, it's not joyful, it's all solemn and reverent. And no, it means building a temple of a substance that is of a frequency that can welcome the joy of life, that can welcome the fire of love.
Well, it's strong enough to hold all the frequencies.
Thank you.
That's the whole range, all the colors, all the emotions, all the frequencies. It's a strong enough crucible to hold it all.
Well, that's the other thing we've said before in the alchemical process. The crucible has to be strong enough to hold all the elemental forces that need to be turned from lead into gold.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have a chalice strong enough to hold it.
Right.
Otherwise, you've got spillage and breakage.
Mm-hmm.
That's dangerous. Which is why the mind has to be purified, why the heart has to be opened at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Because the heart really is the hearth of the fire of love.
Yeah.
So, let's continue. He just said, once you stabilize this, and this, then you're ready to do it. Not only can he use these faculties, but he is able now to create and vivify thought forms that are clear and well-defined, pulsating with the spirit of service and not controlled by lower mind or desire. So it goes back to energy follows thought. With our mind, we create. So at this stage of our evolution, we are not creating chaos. We're not creating more a Maya, an illusion. We are actually creating clear seeds of the future that hold the promise of a vision of the future. They're not tainted by our own discolorings, our own unredeemed aspects. So when you reach this stage on the path of the third initiation, you can actually join in as a co-creator, and what you submit and what you contribute doesn't detract. It actually supports the unfolding of the future. So these thought forms will not be as in the case with those created by the mass of people, disjointed, unconnected, and uncorrelated, but will attain a fair measure of synthesis. Once again, our thoughts aren't just random thoughts that we've put out because, oh, I had this thought, I had that thought. We are consciously thinking. We are being mindfully meditative.
Mm.
And we're using every thought as an act of blessing. Imagine when our thoughts are, oh my God, what have I got to do today? I'm really worried about this. I'm getting the list to the to-do list together. No, the mind doesn't need to do that in the future. The to-do list is to create the future.
Right.
And precipitate it into the present through these living thought forms.
Right.
And we only get the capacity to do it when we've reached the third initiation.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that it makes sense. It's sort of the dissolution of your personal desire for the greater project.
Right. It's like you can have this wonderful thing, and then you do a what's in it for me. Well, I'd like to throw this in as well. I see myself. Like, give me this.
Right.
Like bargaining.
Yeah. Exactly. But it's the renunciation of all that, a release of all that.
You hit that word, renunciation. We're going to come to that later with the fourth initiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
So let's carry on. Hard and ceaseless must the work be before this can be done. But when the desire nature has been stabilized and purified, then the control of the mind-body comes more easily. Hence, the path of the devotee is easier in some ways than that of the intellectual person, for he has learnt the measures of purified desire and progresses by the requisite stages. So these are the two paths. You have the mystical path and the occult path,
mm-hmm.
and we're told that in the future these paths have to be combined.
Right.
The path in this new era has to be a blend of the occult and mystical. It has to be a synthesis of the two. Mm-hmm. But it's easier to be the path of the heart, the devotee, because you're not using your mind to configure reality. You're using your heart to be open to a devotional connection.
Right. Yeah.
But when you use your mind, then you're in danger of having, like when you get too close to the amp with your guitar, you get a big feedback.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
You're in danger of getting feedback from your own mental signals.
Yeah, it's so obvious to see. It's like the mental. You can be swayed by the illusion of utilitarianism. But the heart, romanticism, it can make you, abdicate your duty, so to speak.
The heart, though, perceives everything in right proportion, whereas the mind can get things out of proportion, particularly the lower mind, which is where we get into fixed beliefs, fanaticism,
right,
and points of view rather than viewing points.
Exactly. I always like that when you say that. Yeah.
So let's keep making our way through this. The third initiation is the first initiation from the angle of the Masters of Wisdom. It is the one in which the spiritual person demonstrates his complete control of the personality. So basically, the first and second are prep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they only really, the ashram or the Masters of Wisdom basically saying, yeah, this person's ready because they've got themselves under control. Before they got part of themselves under control. Now they got themselves under control. It's the old image of a rider and a horse.
Right.
The rider and the horse at some point move as one. Mm. You don't have a bucking bronco.
No. Yeah, you have to move. Yeah, exactly. That's so apt. Yeah.
So it says, the physical body has been controlled through the medium of the physical disciplines. The emotional nature has been reorganized and made receptive to spiritual impression coming from the plane of pure reason, the Buddhic plane, through the transforming processes of the mind, or the fifth principle. In this connection, the mind has acted as an organizer of astral reaction and as dispeller of glamour. Well, there's a lot in there, but this basically recaps what we went through in the first and second initiations. So the physical body has been controlled through the medium of physical disciplines. That means we take care of ourselves and our body doesn't suddenly go off on a tangent.
Mm-hmm.
We're in control, not only in control, but we take care of it.
Yeah.
And then it says the emotional nature has been reorganized and made receptive to spiritual impression coming from the plane of pure reason, the Buddhic plane. And we do that when we move from the lower 4 subplanes to the higher 3, because the higher 3 are reflected, they're reflections of the Buddhic.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you look, now let's go back to the Star of David, these 2 interlaced triangles. Number 1 is reflected on earth as number 7. Number 2 as number 6. Number 3 as number 5. And in the middle you have 4, the bridge. Which means that number, if you like, well, let's get away from numbers. If the emotional plane, the astral plane, its higher correspondence that it is a reflection of is the Buddhic plane, the plane of intuitive love and wisdom. Therefore, once you've ascended or made your way from the lower 4 to the upper 3, your feeling life, and I don't call it emotional life, your life of sensitivity as a human being is one where you're sensitized to receiving these impressions from a higher level, and you're not underwater. Then it says, through the transforming process of the mind, or the 5th principle, so you use the mind to elevate. So the mind can say to the emotions at some point, no, I hear your signal, I hear your desire, this is what I'm choosing. But the lower mind may not be able to do that to the same degree, but the higher mind can.
Right.
Because the mind is that which can illumine. As we said before, when things are really out of control, emotions will always trump logic, will always beat logic.
Yeah.
You can come to a person with a rational reason why they should change. And if they're emotionally charged and infused with whatever the passion of that emotion is, there's no way you can get them to change through logic.
That's true.
Which is why addiction has to be broken with something great, of a greater impact than itself. The 12-step program and its approach is, so it has to be a greater imprinting to replace.
Because the logic is obvious. You're killing yourself. You're hurting yourself. Stop that. Well, no. So that's where logic breaks down. Is you need they call it a higher power or a higher reason for living.
Well, the only way you can stop the addiction is by replacing it with a new pattern of a higher imprint,
right?
Of a higher frequency. It's a scientific fact. It's not just a religious thing. It's a scientific fact. Then it says, the disciple is now focused in his everyday consciousness upon the mental plane, and the triangular relation of the 3 aspects of the mind upon this plane is now dominant. So you're now working from the upper 3.
Okay.
You're working from the higher mind, which includes your ability to access the lower mind, but the lower mind is not controlling. It's a resource.
Yeah. It's an important distinction. You're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater here.
No.
You're to use the
yes.
very colloquial phrase. But I think that's important to remember that this is you're ascending as a complete and total vehicle. You're not jettisoning.
Thank you. You're not jettisoning. You're not leaving behind. You're bringing with you and raising it up. So your physical body, your emotional body, as you grow, you are doing those atoms and those beings a service. A rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. I like too the idea that when in the process of becoming a butterfly, it's not you're transforming the entire being. You know.
Well, and that's why this third initiation is called Transfiguration.
Yeah.
It really is the butterfly test.
It is.
Green soup time.
That's right.
Well, green soup, you went into the green soup in the second initiation, and then this is the emergence. But then there's more later.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you're not
There's
a
always more
butterfly
later.
forever. You're not a butterfly forever because that's
true.
still a form.
That's true. Yeah.
So let's complete this third initiation. Well, the reading of it.
Right.
At the third initiation, the control of the soul-illumined mind is finally established, and the soul itself assumes the dominant position and not the phenomenal form. All the limits of the form nature are then transcended. It goes back to breaking free from the gravitational pull, reaching escape velocity, as we would say in the astronomical thing.
Right.
Looking at spaceships and satellites and rockets, it's escape velocity. Well, escape velocity is not so much a speed, it's a frequency.
Right.
Which is a speed. It's the vibratory speed of the atoms.
That's right.
So the third initiation is really when the horse and the rider are one.
That's right. Yeah. 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 That's when you kind of come into you're in the groove, you're in the pocket.
And your vehicle is then part of your natural expression. So when you act from this level of consciousness, all your actions are pure expressions of the soul's intent. They don't carry with it some of the incompleteness of the emotional tinting and the mental aberrations and all of that. So this is a refinement, which is why, from the ashramic point of view, this is deemed to be the first test, the first initiation. We call it the first. It is the third, but they count it as number one when they register. When somebody has got the third initiation, right, okay, now we can work with this person more clearly.
Right, yeah.
Or this being can enter into a greater life. It isn't as though suddenly we get approved by higher beings. No, it's life itself, growing itself to be at one with itself. So the homecoming is us preparing ourselves to come home.
That's right.
And there are no free rides.
Yeah, no,
You've got to earn your passage.
That's right.
Got to work your passage on this one. So the last sentence on this. The first three major initiations have always to be taken when in a physical body and upon the physical plane, thus demonstrating initiate consciousness through both mind and brain. This is a point not oft emphasized and sometimes contradicted. So it's basically saying, look, these first three, you've got to leave an impression. You actually, this is, once again, this is not a written test. This is an in-the-flesh test.
Yeah, it's a lived
It's a lived experience. You have got to prove that you can liberate the light of consciousness inside the dense physical matter, the dense emotional matter, and the dense mental matter of your instrument. If you can't prove that, you can't get out.
Yeah, you have to wait in there because you can. I think that's a difference too between being stuck in the mental. Is you're afraid to get your hands dirty and get down in the mud and
absolutely.
You can be the sort of ivory towers of the university and afraid to get.
Well, that's the fear, and we've said that was the thing we did with the near birth experience. No, I don't want to be incarnated.
Yeah, yeah, you have to get down in the muck.
But the reason is that it's the way in which we help to liberate the whole body of Earth. We're not just doing it to make Michael or Joey a more radiant being. We're here for the evolution of the consciousness of the planet itself.
Yeah.
If we lose sight of that, then it all becomes very personal and we want recognition, and we want to sort of wear a badge saying, hey, I'm a third degree initiate.
Yeah. That's true. There is that. We do like to show off our accolades.
Yeah.
But I think that is an interesting aspect to this mystery tradition, or this ancient wisdom tradition. Is unlike other traditions, there is not an accumulation of gold stars. It's actually, you're getting rid of them at each step. You're getting rid of more accolades. You're getting rid of more layers.
Well, the badge of recognition you wear is an illumined mind and an open heart.
That's right.
And a radiant being.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And you become obvious to fellow travelers.
You become obvious to fellow travelers who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear.
Yeah.
So you're ready to move into the fourth?
Let's move on. May the fourth be with you.
May the fourth be with us. The fourth is called Crucifixion. So let's go through this gently, because once again, it's beyond where we're at. At some point, we'll be in this.
Right.
And yet it's helpful to know that, at some point I have to do this. At some point, I need to work on this at some point. And so you can begin aspiring to that.
Right.
Which is an upward movement.
Yeah.
So the fourth initiation, called Crucifixion. Before the fourth initiation can be taken, the work of training is intensified, and the hastening and accumulation of knowledge has to be unbelievably rapid. The initiate has frequent access to the library of occult books, and after this initiation, he can contact not only the master with whom he is linked and whom he has worked consciously for a long time, but he also can assist other greater beings in their service of the planet. Mm. And by library, this may not be a physical library, although it could be.
Yeah.
But it's the halls of wisdom. Mm-hmm. The life of the person who takes the fourth initiation or crucifixion is usually one of great sacrifice and suffering. It is the life of the person who makes the great renunciation. Mm. Yeah, there's that word again, Charlie. And even exoterically, it is seen to be strenuous, hard, and painful. He has laid all, even his perfected personality, upon the altar of sacrifice and stands bereft of all. All is renounced. Friends, money, reputation, character, standing in the world, family, and even life itself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, bummer, man. I thought we just perfected our life, but now we've got to lose this. What's going on? Remember, everything progresses through this regenerative cycle of birth and death. Mm-hmm. You die to one thing to be born to another. You disidentify in order to identify with something greater, which then has to be disidentified.
Yeah.
And then you reach something greater. So they're like stepping stones on the path. Yeah. Don't get your foot stuck on a stepping stone. Keep moving. But you can only move to the next stone when you're ready to lift your foot and move it. You've got to earn the right to stand on the next stone on this path.
Yeah.
So it's people go, oh God, no. You mean once I've gotten it together, I've got to lose it all at the ultimate loss? Mm-hmm. And this is where all is renounced. And I'm just thinking, I know we refer to the Bible, not because we're necessarily a Christian center, but we draw from all the different sources. But I'm thinking of, Jesus on the cross. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Mm-hmm. Everything's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an intensely beautiful and heartbreaking moment.
It's the burning ground. It's you hear this phrase, the dark night of the soul. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who go through, like they've lost a relationship or they've lost a loved one, I've just gone through the dark night of the soul. No, this is the dark night of the soul. When there's no ground upon which to stand. You say, I've got nothing to stand. Well, there's not even ground So don't even consider it. You can't stand because there is nothing.
Right.
There is absolutely nothing. It's just like the caterpillar being dissolved in the green soup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the caterpillar's going, oh my God. I mean, what happened to me?
Yeah.
But what you forget, the caterpillar also has the imaginal cells of the perfected butterfly. So when you go through the crucifixion, the fourth, you already carry within you the imaginal cells of the resurrection.
That's right.
And the ascension.
Yeah. You become the harvested wheat,
Yeah. But you've got to go through it.
Yeah, you have to go through it.
And we're not speaking here from personal experience. We're just speaking of the impressions received by reading this, because this is what it does to me. It goes, oh, I have to be prepared to lose everything in order to gain everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a very crude way, we said before, if I'm holding on to something with a clenched fist, that clenched fist freezes me. It does not allow me to give, and it does not allow me to receive. I have stemmed the flow of time,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm holding on to something which is just locked me in place.
Mm-hmm.
When I open my clenched fist, I'm able to receive and I'm able to give.
Yeah.
After the fourth initiation, the initiate is admitted into closer fellowship in the lodge, and his contact with the devas is more complete. But we'll get back to, well, let's deal with it now. What do you mean the devas?
Yeah,
Who are these beings, these angels? Well,
Let's get
because
into that.
there is a parallel line of development. I won't say stream of evolution because I don't think devas evolve. They develop, they progress. Humanity evolves because the light was buried in the darkness, and so we didn't carry with us deep self-awareness, whereas we're told that the angels don't have a will other than the will of God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that as you develop, you have a greater capacity to respond to that will.
Right.
In this angelic development, is my understanding.
Yeah.
I've talked to people who are familiar with this and who have a first-hand experience of it, and my own impressions of working with what we call the Davic realm or the angelic realm, is that these are the great builders. They're like the architects. They hold the plan in place. They hold the if you like, the imprint or the pattern of a species of flowers, an animal. They also hold the imprint of a planet. And so there are great angelic presences or Davic presences that are part of the thought form building at a deeper level. Mm-hmm. And it's said that eventually we will come closer in cooperation with the Devas, and that when we have perfected the human experience, the body that we will live in will be of a very subtle nature, but it will be built out of a cooperation between the Deva and the human streams, and we will take the form of the divine hermaphrodite. And I'd like to either come back to that later today, or we may have to do part 5 of this. But it's worth revisiting. And if you go back to the Gnostic text, and if you go back to the ageless wisdom teaching and esoteric Christianity, they say that the Christ, and we're not talking about the Master Jesus who was Christed, we're talking about the presence of the Christ, is the teacher of men and angels alike. That's one of the names given.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So there's a great mystery here. And we hinted at this, I think, a year ago when we were doing the podcast, that we have all of these realms inside of us. So the Devas, although they live on the outside, it's said that our soul is woven out of Davic substance. It's said that when the birth of humanity happened, 18 million years ago, that's what the ageless wisdom gives us a timetable, the fire could only be housed in a suitable fireplace, as we've said. We hadn't constructed that fireplace yet in our evolution, but there was a group of devas whose substance was perfected mind, the devas of pure mind. And because it was the mind, the fire of mind, they gave of their substance to create a fireplace that could receive the fire of mind. They were called the Manasa Devas. And so inside of us, we have elemental beings, we have elemental consciousness, we have Devic substance, we have the monad. It's said that humanity is where the whole of creation meets. And that is part of the great mystery. It isn't like we're special because we're human. No, the specialness is that this is where everything meets and everything can know itself.
Yeah, we're each a universe unto itself, you know.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's why it says, man, know thyself, and you will know the universe.
That's right.
That was the whole teaching of the mystery schools. Pythagoras, the sign above the Pythagorean school was, man, know thyself. Mm-hmm. I believe that the sign above the school of daily life now is, be yourself.
Yeah, I like that. You become what you are. You are the universe unto which the universe is happening.
So this is pretty lofty stuff, but it's what awaits us.
Yeah, it helps give some perspective, and as a mental exercise. Again, you know, if it doesn't resonate you, it's fine. But if it does resonate with you, I mean, at least it does for me. You know, it just lights up. There's so many things.
What it does, you don't go, oh, yeah, I get it. It goes, oh, wow, that rings a bell. Or that resonates, which means there's something in you that will grow into a deeper understanding later.
Yeah. It's not really a process of learning. It's more of a process of remembering, you know.
And revelation.
Yeah.
So here it says, when a person takes the fourth initiation, he functions in the fourth plane vehicle, the Buddhic, and has escaped permanently from the personality ring past not. So once again, the three bodies, physical, emotional, mental body of our incarnated instrument, is not a place of incarceration or imprisonment. It is now a lighted instrument in the hands of the soul. The soul can wield this creative force because it has a pure and responsive vehicle. The great act of renunciation at the fourth initiation marks the moment when the disciple has nothing in him which relates him to the three worlds of human evolution. His contact with those worlds in the future will be purely voluntary and for the purpose of service. So you are no longer chained to the wheel of rebirth, as the Buddhists would say.
Right.
And yet, like a lot of bodhisattvas, you choose the path of service, earth service, and you say, I'm going to come back and help everybody get out of here. I'm a first responder for earth.
That's right.
And I want to make sure everyone's safe, everyone gets out of here. I'll be the last one out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting
Now that's an act of sacrifice.
Exactly, yeah.
But truly, when you look at the word sacrifice, it means to make sacred. Mm-hmm. And you make sacred by consecrating your life in service to others. Mm-hmm. And consecration is a fiery act.
Yeah.
So sacrifice is a fiery statement of being. Yeah. So when you reach the stage of fiery awareness, there's nothing else you can do than be of service.
That's right, yeah.
So now we go on to what we talked about before, the Rainbow Bridge. Since he first put his foot on the path, he has been trying to build the Antakarana, the Rainbow Bridge. even that has meant for him an act of faith, and he proceeds in the early stages with the work of building, yet scarcely knowing what he does. He follows blindly the ancient rules and attempts to accept as factual that which has not been proven to him to be a fact, but which is testified to by countless thousands down the ages. So you're going on faith here.
Mm-hmm.
Others have gone before. If you believe the Buddha, then you may believe the Buddha's words.
Right.
If you believe that the Buddha became enlightened and is a liberated soul and didn't just get the heck out of here, said, oh,
right.
I'm going to be around to help you guys, then you realize that, oh, this is the natural path.
Mm-hmm.
The whole process is in the nature of a culminating triumph of that innate sense of deity which has driven man forward from the most primitive experiences and physical adventures to this great adventure of constructing a pathway for himself from the dense material world into the spiritual.
Yeah.
So the Rainbow Bridge was building this path. As I say, the road comes up to meet you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure does. Yeah, when you're in frequency, when you have the frequency key, the road does rise to meet you.
And then it goes into some technical things, and maybe we can look at them. But some of these technical things, we can have a lot, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it may not be, oh yeah, get it.
Yeah.
So hitherto, the person has worked primarily with the thread of consciousness. This is anchored in the head. And through that, consciousness, his personality, and his soul are linked together. This is, we've talked about the thread of consciousness and the thread of life. And when you go to sleep, you're released. The thread of consciousness is released. The thread of life, thank God, is still intact, and that allows you to wake up again in the morning.
Yeah.
But the thread of consciousness, when it's released, allows you to go traveling.
It sure does.
And go to night school.
Yeah. I like that. Night school.
And then come back.
Yeah.
But it says, and his soul are linked together until he has become a soul-infused personality. He has then attained unity with his higher self. Through the building of the Antakarana, another thread is added to the soul-infused personality. And the true spiritual individual is linked with and comes under the direction of the spiritual triad. The spiritual triad is the higher self.
Mm-hmm.
It's the triad, it's the triangle, which at the center burns the monadic fire.
Yeah.
So the triad really, the upper triad, is the fireplace for the highest possible fire, when you're using occult parlance.
Yeah.
I'll just do a few more, because otherwise it gets sort of in the realm of speculation and beyond our ken, beyond our understanding. At the fourth initiation, the soul body, the causal body, so-called, disappears, and the thread of consciousness is occultly snapped. Neither the soul body nor the thread are any longer required. They become now only the symbols of a non-existent duality. The soul is no longer the repository of the consciousness aspect as hitherto. All that the soul has stored up of knowledge, science, wisdom, and experience, garnered in the life cycle of many eons of incarnation, are now the sole possession of the individual spiritual person. He transfers them into the higher correspondence of the sensory perceptive apparatus, the instinctual nature on the three planes of the three worlds. And this for some people is like difficult to grasp. I mean, yeah, but doesn't the soul go on forever? Isn't the soul eternal? The soul is an intermediary. It's the fireplace that carries the fire of heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
When we've reached a point of evolution, of growth, where our vehicle is now able to directly be in contact with our highest fire. The bridge is no longer needed. We've reached the Holy Land. We've reached that land. You only need a bridge when there's a division between two parts.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, when the soul dissolves, once again, we're not plunged into nothingness. It dissolves when there is a permanent connection between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Between the personality or the person of the spiritual pilgrim
Yeah.
and the spiritual aspect
Yeah.
of the pilgrim, of the eternal pilgrim. So once again, this is beyond our whatever.
Yeah.
But for some people, there's this fear, oh my God, my soul's going to die. No, no.
It's
When something is no longer needed in evolution, it's let go of. Nothing exists if it's redundant.
right. Yeah.
And it's only let go of because it's not needed.
Yeah.
Not because it's a punishment or it's taken away from us. We don't need the bridge anymore because we are standing on connected ground.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea. I love that concept. It's a little mind blowing.
I thought we were going to cover more today. There is another part to this. I mean, I think we're going to take a break here at the fourth initiation because beyond that, it really doesn't register in our current waking consciousness.
Yeah.
And we want to make all of this stuff useful to people. More information wouldn't be useful. I think what we've covered in the first, second, and also the third initiation is useful, can be put to use in our daily lives.
Yeah.
And then we understand that this goes on forever. This is infinite. And it isn't just human beings and planets. It's solar systems evolving. Solar logos is evolving. Solar logoi, plural, are taking initiations. Because taking initiation, don't think about it sitting in an exam room in a university. No, you're in the classroom of incarnated life. You're in the classroom of time and space. And what you're doing is you are revealing through your ability, through your competency, the truth that lives at the heart of life. Therefore, everything is this nested universe of evolving lives. And initiation is the ordered progression on the path. You can't go from 1 to 4. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it stops. And then we take another ladder of another dimension somewhere, of another being.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, the Christ, the being or the Bodhisattva or the Buddha, it's said that they are taking their 7th initiation. And beyond that, that's what is speculation.
Right.
Who's to say?
Yeah.
Who's to say? All I know is that you and I are here now, faced with liberating ourselves from the worlds of illusion.
That's right.
Purifying our bodies so that we can be of greater service and becoming, if you like, a lighted point on the planet. Not so that people can say, oh, look at that bright light, but so the light can shine in the darkness and make it easier for people to see what's in front of us.
Yeah.
Because this is a collective journey, Joey. And once again, we better reemphasize that initiation is a collective journey into the mind and heart of the Creator. Before it was, if you like, the hero's journey, as you've talked about, where you've got to prove that you can do it alone, like an assault course, an obstacle course.
Right. Yeah.
And but this is not boot camp in this. This is a group response to a call, a homecoming call.
Yeah. So it's a group endeavor.
It is group endeavor. And group endeavor is the pathway that leads us into an understanding of the principle of unanimity. Unanimity is one soul.
Yeah.
So initiation is the pathway into greater levels of beingness. And that's the trend.
Yeah.
That's the desire of the Creator, as far as we're told.
Right.
So
Yeah,
go with the flow.
that's right. I
Release the
love it.
handbrake.
Yeah, jump and leap and the net will appear, you know.
So it looks as though we're going to do a part 5 to this series on initiation. We didn't know when we started. I thought it would take us 3, and then, of course, we'll wrap it in 4.
Yeah.
I think we need a 5 just to sort of take a
Yeah. Well,
breath, recap this, and put it into the larger context of the evolution of the planet through the full flowering of humanity as one of the organs within this organism that is Gaia, this living planet.
yeah.
So, Joey,
That's
what
great. Yeah.
what have you received so far? Not just from today, but if you take, because we've covered the first 4 initiations, and this is as far as we're going to go in our exploration. But what's your takeaway? What's new in you now as a result of us exploring this together?
For me, I think the biggest part is that it gives context to the patterns of life that I've seen. So, you know, there is that kind of thing when the older you get, the way you look back, you think, oh, you see these patterns in the way that, you know, how did I possibly get here? And then you realize, oh, you had to have gotten here because of how this all works. And as I see these and study these initiations, you realize there's more to what there's no coincidence, you know, and you're participating in something, and that participation is not random. And the more you open yourself up to it, and the more you release, and for me, this is my personal experience, the more you can call it light, data, illumination, whatever you want, the more it comes in.
Right. And it's interesting you use the word coincidence, because we touched on this before. We said, when you're unaware, when things actually sort of gel and go, wow, what a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when you are free, say like at the 3rd and the 4th initiation, everything is coincidental. Everything is connected and happening together.
Yeah.
But from our perspective, a coincidence is like, oh my God, it's a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a miracle is how life flows when it's unimpeded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's a big thing for me is making it real. You know, the realness of everyday life, and then seeing all these different connections and how you end up in a place and how people end up in your lives, but also just, you know, these lessons that you learn. You know, and for me, it's again, just there's been a strong desire to. I use that word desire. Look, there's been a release of desire. You know, and I was so driven by desire my entire life, and now that sort of you giving up that desire, I was afraid for a minute that, like, well, how am I possibly going to live life without? And then you realize it's a greater mission that comes in once you clear the path. Once you clear the area, you know, you have to like close one. Basically, you have to close one door to open another, but you also have to like sweep out the old so that this new thing can come in.
right. And you mentioned desire. What if you look at the distinction between desire on the lower 4 subplanes
Mm-hmm.
and the desire on the higher 3?
Yeah.
Desire on the higher 3 is more of an aspiration.
Mm.
The desire on the 4 is a reinforcement of the patterns
Yeah.
in that dimension.
I also kind of think of it as in an energy way, like if you think of energy as positive, negative. It's like in the lower field, your desire is you want things to come into you.
Yeah.
You want, whether it's experience or money or pleasure. And then the higher desire, it's the opposite. You're broadcasting out to be of service. Your energy is going out. You know?
Well, we talked about that before, is that if I'm negative to something and positive to something,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, if I'm positive to the world of form, you know, I can transmit into it. If I'm negative to it, I'm filled by it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm negative to spirit, if I'm receptive to spirit,
Mm-hmm.
to my own light, then it's both receiving
Yeah.
and transmitting.
Right.
So wow. I'm just thinking what I'd like to do for my wrap up of
Yeah.
this is to read something that we read once before to close out a session.
Okay.
This is a affirmation given by the Tibetan, whose words we've been reading through this Ponder on this series, that he gave to Roberto Assagioli, the inspiration behind all of the work here at Meditation Mount, because Roberto was a direct disciple of and received instructions from the Tibetan master. And he was given this to remind himself of who he is and what journey he's on.
Mm.
And so for me, this represents a reminder of the journey, and it's one I use upon waking.
Mm-hmm.
So let me close out my contribution with this. I am a messenger of light. I am a pilgrim on the way of love. I do not walk alone, but know myself as one with all great souls, and one with them in service. Their strength is mine. This strength I claim. My strength is theirs, and this I freely give. A soul. I walk on earth. I represent the One.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Joey.
All right. We'll see you for the next part.